Good afternoon, everyone. And for those of you that haven't been to Malden in a while, welcome home. My name's Kevin Jarvis, and I'm the Director of Veteran Services for the City of Malden. And welcome to the dedication ceremony for Private First Class Paul W. Trainor Memorial Square. This was Paul's home as a boy, and the Trainor family lived here. And this is probably the last place that Paul slept in Malden before he went to Vietnam. Before we start, I'd like to just ask everybody to take off your hats. We're going to say the Pledge of Allegiance, the U.S. flag's right here, in honor of Paul Trainor.
Detail, present arms.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. As you can see, it's quite a crowd. I think everybody can probably hear me. If not, move up. Paul Trainor was born in Medford, Massachusetts on February 2nd, 1949, to William J. Trainor and Lillian J. Murphy. He lived right here at 44 Highland Ave in Malden. Paul went to Immaculate Conception Grammar School, as I did, and then graduated Malden Catholic High School in June of '67. On November 27, 1967, Paul enlisted in the United States Marine Corps. From May 5, 1958 until August 2, 1968, Paul proudly served his country in Vietnam. He served with the 3rd Platoon, Echo Company, 2nd Battalion, 4th Marines with the 9th Marine Amphibious Brigade, 3rd Marine Division, United States Marine Corps. Paul is one of 19 men from Malden, 1,500 from Massachusetts, and more than 58,000 Americans who died in that long and costly war in Vietnam. Paul was one of 34 Americans that were killed in Vietnam on August 2nd, 1968. 1968 was the worst year for American casualties during the war in Vietnam. Not that any year was much better, but that was the worst. Like many young men and women back then, Paul joined the Marines in a noble cause to stop the spread of communism. The U.S. got involved in Vietnam to stop the communists from spreading into the region. They had killed and persecuted many Vietnamese Catholics who fled to the south by the hundreds of thousands. We, as in the United States, thought that perhaps we could split the country in two as we did in Korea, but that was not to be the case. Paul grew up in Edgeworth, like many of us here today, and I remember how the community felt his loss that summer. 1968, for those of you that remember, was a very turbulent time, and more Americans died in Vietnam that year than any other time. I used to sit and watch TV every night. We'd eat dinner. It was just my dad and the 3 boys. We had a little tray tables and whatever from Forgioni's Market. He didn't cook too well, so wasn't that place great over there, Forgioni's? And you know, every night on the news, we'd watch Vietnam. It was unbelievable. They'd show casualties and helicopter medevacs and dead right there on television. It was unbelievable. It desensitized a lot of people, I think. It certainly turned a lot of people off and against the war, and by that time, rightfully so, I guess. Massachusetts has the sad distinction of being the home state of the very first man killed in Vietnam. His name was Richard Fitzgibbon, Jr. from Stoneham, Massachusetts. He was killed on June 8, 1956. I was 2 months old. And also the last man killed in Vietnam, Charles McMahon from Woburn, Massachusetts. Charles was killed with a buddy of his at the Ton Son Nhut Airport by a rocket attack on April 29, 1975. And I see we have John Gillane with us here today, who just came back from Saigon. He and 15 other Marine security guards, including my former boss, John Valdez, went back there to dedicate a monument and plaque in honor of Charles McMahon and Darwin Judge at the American Consulate at Ho Chi Minh City. And they did that, I believe, on April 30th, 2015. So congratulations, Semper Fi, John. I might have been 2 months old when Mr. Fitzgibbon was killed in Vietnam. But when Charles McMahon died, I was a 19-year-old Marine corporal on a ship in the Pacific heading to Saigon. Things happened so quick, I never got there. but a few of my friends came in with a battalion of, he was a machine gunner. Colonel Gray, who later became Commandant Gray of the Marine Corps, went in to help augment the Marine security guards at the embassy. Now, Paul, he had a friend in the Marine Corps named Craig Swain from Medford. Paul and Craig trained together, laughed together, they fought together, and on August 2nd, 1968, they died together in Quang Tri Province, Republic of South Vietnam. We have with us today family and friends of Paul Trainor, and I believe Craig Swain's sister, Karen Connors. Karen, I didn't see you earlier, sorry. With us today is Paul's brother Alfred and his wife Fran, their daughter Michelle and grandson Anthony. Paul's brother John and his wife Kathy are here with their son Paul and his fiancee Ryan. Paul's sister's also here, Michelle Long, who we just spoke a few minutes ago. My brother went to school with Al, so I knew about Al Trainor my whole life, Paul Trainor as well, I'm sorry. And I didn't know that much about Al, I'll take that back. I don't think you want to know. But at this time, you don't want to hear me. There are other people here who would like to say a few words about Paul Trainor and the other Marines and servicemen that were killed in Vietnam and all our wars over the years. I'd like to introduce our next speaker, Catherine Clark. She was first elected to the state legislature in March 2008 to represent Melrose and Wakefield in the Massachusetts House of Representatives. Later elected to the Massachusetts State Senate, where she served to promote education, public safety, homeland security, and veterans and federal affairs. Catherine used to work as a prosecutor, a school committee member, general counsel for the Massachusetts Office of Child Care Services, and also in the Attorney General's office for the Chief of the Policy Division. She now serves proudly as Congresswoman for the 5th District of Massachusetts. Her career in public service is driven by her commitment in helping children and families succeed. Catherine graduated St. Lawrence University, Cornell University School of Law, and Kennedy School of Government at Harvard. But behind the scenes, Catherine's also helped a lot of veterans. A lot of veterans get the treatment that they need after they come back from overseas. Not long ago, she worked with a friend of mine named Greg Matos, who in 2004 was a young Marine sergeant. Greg was awarded the Bronze Star for repelling an al-Qaeda attack on the U.S. consulate in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia in 2004. He was a sergeant, but today, because of people like Catherine Clark and other people who helped him through the system, Greg just graduated college, was commissioned. He's a lieutenant in the U.S. Navy, where he now serves as a psychologist taking care of other sailors and Marines. Ladies and gentlemen, Congresswoman Catherine Clark.
Thank you so much. It is an incredible honor and privilege to be here with the Trainor family and also with the Swain family as well. We are delighted to be here. And thank you. I want to acknowledge Mayor Gary Christensen, State Senator Jason Lewis, State Representative Steve Altrino, State Representative Paul Donato. We have all sorts of city councilors and school committee members here. And it was quite a sight to come up this street and see this crowd that is gathered. Whether you knew Paul when he was at Malden Catholic or from the neighborhood, this is such a tribute on a day where we pay tribute to those who have given all they have to give, given their very lives so that we can have the freedom and the democracy and the community that we so enjoy here in Malden. It is also such a poignant reminder of the burden that are not only our fallen service member, but their families endure the rest of their lives. And we so appreciate our veterans who are here, as well as the families of all of those who serve. It's really that support that helps us maintain a way to make sure that our country and that our families are safe, and that we pass on the patriotism and the ideals of our country to the next generation. So I couldn't be more proud to be here on this Memorial Day to honor Paul Trainor, and through him to honor everyone who has served this country. We are so grateful for those who have given their lives so that we can continue to build a country, a commonwealth, and the city of Malden to all it can be. So I am privileged to be able to say how grateful we are as a Congress and as a nation to what Paul and Lance Colonel Swain gave us back in Vietnam. Thank you for being here today, and thank you for having me.
At this time, I'd like to introduce a man who cares deeply about the city of Malden, and especially the men and women who are Malden's veterans. His tireless efforts were instrumental in the building and unveiling of the World War II Memorial at Bell Rock Park in June of 2010, and for providing me with the funding to restore and dedicate other memorials like Paul's throughout the city. He's a man of his word, and Malden's lucky to have him at its helm. Ladies and gentlemen, Mayor Gary Christensen.
Good afternoon. President John F. Kennedy reminded us that a nation reveals itself not only by the men it produces, but also by those it honors and remembers. Thanks to the advocacy of Kevin Jarvis, who works tirelessly for our veterans and their families, Malden has initiated the dedication of many squares and memorials throughout the city to honor and remember our fallen soldiers. Today we pay tribute to Private First Class Paul Trainor, who grew up in this area of Malden, left his family in the safety of his home to enlist in the Marines, and ultimately sacrificed his life in Vietnam. We also remember his friend from Medford, Craig Swain, who died on the same day. It is because of the brave men and women like these two heroes that our freedom, values, and all America stands for remains protected. In keeping with Malden's motto, strong past, proud future, the dedication of this square represents Private Trainor's willingness to answer his country's call to duty and will serve as a reminder to future generations that freedom is not free. As we reflect on the price he and Craig Swain paid, let us also remember all those who fought with them and who sacrificed all their tomorrows so that we could have our todays. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, at this time I'd like to introduce someone that really needs no introduction. State Representative, Ward 2 Councilor Steve Trainor would just like to say a few words and introduce the elected officials here. Steve?
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for coming out today. It's a proud moment not only for the Trainor family for the recognition, but also someone who lives in Ward 2, grew up and still lives right down the street. Following in Mr. Trainor's past, I went to the Immaculate Conception and graduated from Malden Catholic and actually taught there for a few years. But I want to thank Mr. Jarvis for all that he does for our veterans, because when I got elected as the councilor in Edgeworth, as we call it, not so much Ward 2, but Edgeworth, one of the first things we did was revamp all of our memorials for our veterans, but also look for locations and look for those folks like Paul Trainor who we can actually remember, because Malden has changed, but the new people who have come here today have the same goals. But no one should forget the people in our ward and the people in our city who gave the ultimate sacrifice, and that's what this honor is here today. So I want to thank the Trainor family and for not only their sacrifices, but also for them coming back to Malden and recognizing Paul for this today. But I want to recognize some of our elected officials. As you know, we just heard from Congresswoman Catherine Clark. So, Congresswoman, thank you very much for taking time out to come today. And I'm sure she's looking forward to go back to Washington and fight for us. So I appreciate that. Senator Jason Lewis, Senator, thank you very much for coming out. City Council President John Matheson and Council Ward 3. My dear friend, State Representative and Assistant Majority Leader who represents Medford and Malden, Paul Donato. Councilor at Large, Craig Spadafora. Ward 2 School Committee Woman, Maria Doucette. Ward 5 School Committee Member, Adam Weldy. And I also like to recognize the principal of Malden Catholic High School, who was my principal and my boss too for a while, and been there for about 30 years as principal, Brother Tom Puccio. Brother, thank you for coming. There he is way in back. And of course, last but not least, someone who really cares so much about our veterans, but all of the members and residents of the City of Malden, Mayor Gary Christensen. Mayor, thank you. I think I have everyone. Again, thank you for coming. This is an honor to have all of you here coming back to Edgeworth. And this may have been your home. It will always be your home. And we'll always remember Mr. Trainor for many, many, many years ahead. Thank you.
At this time, I'd like to introduce a man who was elected to the Massachusetts Senate in April 2014. He's a Winchester resident, serves as a state senator for the 5th Middlesex District, representing Malden, Melrose, Reading, Stoneham, Wakefield, and Winchester. Also another guy, Harvard University grad. Ladies and gentlemen, Senator Jason Lewis.
Thank you, Kevin. Congresswoman Clark and other distinguished guests, members of the Trainor and the Swain families, veterans, and fellow citizens, it is a great honor for me to join you today to celebrate Memorial Day and the unveiling of Private First Class Paul W. Trainor Memorial Square. President Franklin Roosevelt said, "In the truest sense, freedom cannot be bestowed. It must be achieved." Since the first shots were fired at Lexington and Concord and the Revolutionary War began, brave men and women have been answering our nation's call to duty. These individuals, like PFC Trainor, not only knew words like honor, commitment, courage, sacrifice, they lived by these words, and for our freedom, many died by these words. Today, on Memorial Day and at this special dedication, we are also mindful that there are soldiers, sailors, Marines, airmen, and Coast Guards men and women standing watch around the world at this very instant who are ready to make the same sacrifices as PFC, Paul Trainor, and other brave men and women who gave their lives for our country in wars past. The Greek philosopher Thucydides once said, "The bravest are surely those who have the clearest vision of what is before them, glory and danger alike, and yet, notwithstanding, go out to meet it." Thank you for being here today on this special occasion. God bless our troops and God bless America. Thank you.
We have another speaker with us today, but before I introduce him, Malden Catholic had 3 graduates that were killed in Vietnam, 2 from Malden. John Whedon is a 1963 Malden Catholic grad, an Edgeworth friend and neighbor of Ed Markey. And he has the sad distinction of being Malden's first hero to die in Vietnam on November 21st, 1966. At this time, I'd like to introduce a man who graduated Malden Catholic with Paul Trainor in 1967. Jim Riccardi, would you please come up and say a few words about your friend Paul?
Good afternoon, distinguished guests, friends of Paul, and a lot of my Malden Catholic teammates and students that I went to school with. I just want to say a few things about Paul. Paul had a sensitive soul and was committed to loyalty with his friends and family. When I first met him and I stuck out like sore thumbs in a sea of khaki and blue blazers, penny loafers, and white socks. Well, Paul and I didn't dress like that. In fact, we would term fuscos. You might remember the term. So we gravitated together, although accepted by our other brethren at Malden Catholic. And we had a great 4 years there. When Paul was a senior, he decided to go out for the football team. And not a lot of seniors go out for the team. So he went out, and he was tough, and he was fast, and the coaches liked him, and he got on the team. When it came time for the first game of the year, they didn't have a jersey for him. He had to wear just a clean workout jersey, practice jersey. And I was humiliated for him. I couldn't believe he was going to do this. He donned the jersey, and he ran out on the field with everyone else, and he never batted an eye. He led the cheers. He helped us out. He was oblivious to anything that he had to do to help somebody else out. When he became a Marine, I thought about something. He was loyal. Wherever we went, we had to be sure that everyone was taken care of and no one was in harm's way. He was structured. He always looked neat for school. He worked. He wasn't a great student, but he made sure he got everything done. He was beloved by the teachers. And so I thought about loyalty, structure, and neatness, and commitment. I believe these are things that make a great serviceman or woman. He, without a doubt, lives in my heart all the time. I drive by this street, I don't know how many times a day, and I often think about this and what could have done, and the sacrifice that the Trainor family had to give to help us all live our lives better. I am overwhelmed by the crowd here, for the people who are here that knew him and those who didn't. And I thank you all for helping me get through this day. Thank you very much.
I'd like to thank another person here today who was instrumental in initiating this dedication, along with Paul's brother Al, Chief Kevin Molis. Paul Trainor is buried at Forestdale Cemetery, about 500 feet south of the pond where we had the Memorial Day ceremony today. His family headstone is right on the road. It begins a row of other graves. Next to Paul, beginning the two adjacent rows of graves, rest fellow Edgeworth men Kevin Crow and Anthony Sestito. Both of those men were killed in action on the very same day, June 5th, 1969, in Vietnam. They didn't serve together, but they died the same day. 3 men who called Edgeworth home. They answered their nation's call and proudly served and died for their country. You know, I went online and looked at some of the statements that Al put and the cousins, Dan Cardarelli and others, about Paul. You know, I was a former Marine, or I guess you can't say former anymore. We're all Marines, right, John? And we never forget our fellow Marines. We never leave them on the battlefield. And days like today is when we really think, you know, it hits home. What could have happened to us didn't. Every person that joins the military signs a blank check with their life. And the United States government can cash that check in at any time. whether it's peacetime in Nepal with 6 Marines killed on the helicopter a week or so ago, doing a humanitarian rescue mission, or on the battlefields of Iraq or Afghanistan, wherever ISIS is going to take us before we get rid of them. Sadly, U.S. Marines seem to make up a disproportionate amount of Americans' fallen warriors, but we know that when we join. Malden has lost Marines in Afghanistan, Mike Geary, Iraq, Ed Garvin, Vietnam, men like Paul Trainor, Korea, World War II and World War I, like David Tartikoff in 1918 at Belleau Wood. And I'm sure in other wars as well, Civil War, back to militia, revolutionary days. But all Marines must remember, and all civilians, you better remember this too, that if the Army and the Navy ever look on heaven's scenes, they will find the streets are guarded by United States Marines. Thank you. I almost made it through it. At this time, I'd like to dedicate Paul W. Trainor, Private First Class Marine Corps, Memorial Square. I just have to get my step stool because it's a little high. Marines taking care of Marines. Absolutely. Ladies and gentlemen, PFC Paul W. Trainor, Memorial Square. On behalf of the City of Malden, the Trainor family, and the Swain family, I just want to remind you that there were also 4 other men. There were 6 killed that day on Hill 950 in Quang Tri Province in Vietnam. So thank you very much for coming out today, and I really appreciate it, and so does the family. Thank you.
Thank you, Mom. Beautiful.